Hi and welcome to this Blender training tutorial series. In this series we're going to be looking at tracking and green screen keying in order to composite green screen footage into regular footage and into also digital backgrounds. So the first thing we need to do is to grab some footage that we can actually green screen. And to do that, we're going to head over to this website here. If you go to hollywoodcameraworks.us and come to this plate, I'll put a link in the description on YouTube and probably on the website as well. And you'll come to this page, which is the downloads page. And we're going to start off simple. We're not going to do any tracking in this movie. This is just to get your feet wet, as it were. So if you scroll down, these are all pretty complex shots. This is an incredibly complex shot. What we want is, if we scroll down to about halfway down the page, there's a clip called hair detail, and it's simple. If I just make this full screen and we play it quickly, see, it's just a headshot of a young lady on a static green background. Nothing more to do. All we have to do is take away the green, put in a background, and make sure we don't lose any of this hair detail. Let's close it down, click on the clip, download it, and then if we come to our files, downloads, and you will have HCW locked backdrop. If you just double click that, extract all files, and we can get started. If I close this down now, and I close that, and we want to open Blender, and eeny meeny miny mo, pick the newest one. Okay, now I'm using Blender 2.69, but you'll notice we've got all this funky stuff going on in the side, which might be a little bit different to your version, but this is a pre 2.7 test build, and it's got a few things that are different, but everything else is exactly the same as the regular 2.69. And essentially you can use any version of Blender for this. Right, okay. So now if we don't need the 3D scene, so if we just come down to this little button at the bottom, click it for the viewport menus, and we go to the node editor. Now you'll see it's automatically set. If we look at the settings, it's set to the texture nodes. We want it to be on the compositing node, so click the two little pictures in the middle, or the middle button there, and that switches us to the compositor. We will click on use nodes, and we are immediately given a render layers and composite node, of which we do not need the render layers, so select it, press X, and it's gone. Okay, so first thing we need to do is bring in our image sequence that we've just downloaded. So I'll click on an add node, input, image, and we bring up an image node. Now we click the open button, either go to your downloads file or the file you extracted your things to, and I have no idea where I put mine. So we head to pictures, locked backdrop, and we'll see all the image files. If I just click the little thumbnail icon, and you'll see we have an image sequence of our clip. So if I just click it back to list view, marked from 0 to 79, so we know there are 80 frames. If I just click that top one, you only need to click the top one for this, click open image, you'll see that that is now in the image node. And at the bottom of the image node it says single image. If you click that and choose image sequence from the menu, now where it says frame, just type in excuse me, 80 frames. Click auto refresh, I guess, and we'll click on backdrop, and so we can see the backdrop. We'll press Shift A, add output, viewer node. There we go. Now if we click that, if we press Ctrl and Shift at the same time, and then left click on the image tab, you'll see it connects automatically to the viewer node, which is a handy little shortcut to remember. Ctrl, Shift and left click and it's there. Okay, so now she's a little bit close. It's a bit creepy being too close, so we'll press V on our keyboard to back up the image, so now we can see everything that's going on. I'll just, oops, stupid thing. There we go. I'll just move the composite node and the viewer node just out of the way a little bit. Right. Now the purpose of this little clip is to take away the green and at the same time leave those little fronds of hair floating around. What we're going to do is press Shift A, add map. Now from the map menu we've got a whole different range of keys and masks and spills, and we'll cover those in different tutorials later on, but for now we're just going to go for a basic green cutout, and we're going to use the keying node. Clip that on and we get this big node with lots of confusing and weird things, settings. But if I drop it onto the noodle, immediately you can see we've got some things happening. We're getting some transparency in the model and it's all in the wrong places, and the reason for that is down at the bottom this key colour is set to white, which is a bit weird because if we Shift Control A, if we just look at the view, it's not actually white that's being keyed out. So how weird is that? Anyway, now with all these settings, most of them we can leave the default. Pre-blur will actually blur out little bits of the background before it's keyed, and that can help, but most of the time it actually hinders the keying. Screen balance is how Blender sees the RGB colours and balances the red and the blue against the green and does weird things, and it's all fun. Despill and despill balance, you won't mess around with those so much because we have an actual node that deals with despill, so we'll leave those at default. Edge kernel helps with the edges basically. We'll look at that in a later tutorial. For now, leave it at default. What we're really looking at is the clip black and clip white settings. But before we can do any of that, we have to start and get the green. And now, because the keying node is actually already on there, we might have issues with the colour in the rendered view. So I'm going to take the colour directly from the original image and view it from there. So if I press the key colour, I get this colour wheel, and under the colour wheel we have this little pipette colour picker. So if I click that, and if I click in the viewport here, it'll give me a nice green, and we can see immediately that we've got rid of most of the green. And at first glance, and probably if you're looking at it on YouTube, it probably looks pretty good, but in real life there is some issues in the corners and around the edges of her hair, and we can see that better if instead of looking at the image we look at the map. And the map is simply a black and white image that we use as a mask. So if I press Ctrl and Shift again and left click, my noodle now jumps down to the next output, which is the one we want to look at, and immediately you can see where we've missed all this green which was previously hidden. If I just drag that down there, and this would look absolutely garbage, but the model herself looks pretty good. Yeah, that does actually look really quite good. So what I'm going to aim for is to use this clip black setting to try and pull away as much of this black from the model as we can. And if I just pull it up ever so slightly, you can see it's pulling away, but you can also see it's pulling from the hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if I can get a better shade of green that will take away a lot more of the colour. So if I go back to my colour picker, we can see we're still getting a lot of green in these corners. So if I aim for a pixel in the actual corner of the footage, you'll see that's a whole lot better. Try it one more time, get higher up, see what happens up there. Blam! There we go. That's a lot better. Most of the model is keyed out. Now if we clip black very slightly, we're at a clipping of 0.055, ever such a slight amount. And if we see if we can pull back some of the white by clicking on the dilate erode. No, -1 isn't working, so if we push it up to 1, there, now we're getting more of that hair back, so that looks a lot nicer. Let's try 2. Okay, let's just see that in the viewer. Okay, so now if we look at our final model, we can see we've taken away all the green, and she still has her hair, but it's slightly faded, and that should be okay. We should be good with that. Now we need a background image, so let's head over to Google and go find one. If we head over to our internet and just type in, I don't know, pictures. Let's see what happens when we press that. Google Images. That could have been quite dangerous actually, just randomly picking pictures. Let's see if we can find something that will look nice as a background. Okay, this one looks fine. If we just click Save Image As, it says 3 pictures of nature, so I presume the license is good enough for a little tutorial. Now we've downloaded it, we'll go back to Blender and we'll go Shift A, add input image, open image, go to downloads and click on the image we've just downloaded, and there it is. Now we need to connect it together. Like I say, if I just use an alpha over node, so Shift A, input, convert color alpha over. If we click that there, oops, now what's going on? It used to swap around when you swapped those over. Now you'll see it's all gone horribly wrong, because this image size is actually tiny compared to this one. So what we need to do is tell this image to be the size of our render resolution. So we do that by going Shift A, add distort, scale, plug that on, click that to render size. That's a lot better, and now she's far too big for the image, so we'll press Shift D, duplicate the scale node and drop it right on there, and there, and there we go. Now let's zoom in a little bit by pressing Alt and V. Now you can see she's a little bit transparent in her hair, which, while it works to a degree, isn't ideal, and we can do a lot better if, instead of just using the image straight from the keying node, if we use a mix node. Okay, so if instead of the alpha over we now press Shift A and add a color mix node, we plug that into our viewer, and we plug our background image into the background socket, which is on top, and we bring our keying image into the bottom. You'll see just how you see the actual background isn't quite as clean as we would like it, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is take the matte from the keying node and plug it into the factor, and that creates our cutout. And you'll see we've got a few issues with edges, so I'm going to pull back on the dilate erode node. That's it. There we go. Let's try -1. And that's it. That looks good. Take it up a few frames. Okay, we've gone past too many frames. Remember, we have only 80 frames in our scene. So in our timeline, I'm just going to set it to 80 frames. Press E on my keyboard and that'll cut away everything past 80. Now, the keying looks good and the model looks good, but the background looks a little bit too sharp, and because it was small and it's stretched to fit, we've got a little bit of it's not great. So let's blur it out. We'll go to Add, Distort? No. Convert it? No. What am I looking for? Where's the blur? Filter. Yeah. Filter, blur. Use Gaussian blur. Change it to fast Gaussian. Give it 5 pixels of blur. Yeah, that looks good. I'm happy with that. Now the last thing we need to do is take the mix node, put it in the composite node, and now we go to our render settings, and under render change it to 100%, so it's now at 1920 by 1080 HD. We have anti-aliasing, none of that's important. Now we've got a choice. Under the output settings we can render it out as a sequence of PNGs and then combine them all together, which is usually best practice. But because we've only got 80 frames, I'm not really afraid of the thing crashing. So I'm going to put it straight out into a H.264 file format. Encoding AVI, that's fine. All the bit rates and everything. We've got no audio on it, so I'm going to leave that as none. And then we just hit animation and let it render its frames. Just make sure it's all set. 24 frame. And let's just think about that for a second. Let's just head over to go back to Hollywood Camera Works. Go back to Hollywood Camera. Thank you. We'll just have a look at the settings quickly for this clip. Tech specs 1080p, 30 frames per second. Oops, down. So we want to change our frame rate to 30. Just doesn't actually matter that much because it's image sequences and you'll just have a slightly slower image, which is fine, but we'll keep it at the actual frame rate it was shot at and get real-time animation once it's finished. So let's press the button to go. We'll just let it do its thing. You can see it's rendering frame by frame up at the top. Just zoom out a little bit. And it's all composited nicely onto the background, and I'm going to leave that to do its thing because it's going to take 10-15 minutes to render those 80 frames. So I'll stop the recording and we'll get back to it once we're done. Okay, so that's all finished. Let's head back to our compositor. Okay, so now we're all finished. Let's take a look at the finished scene. And I've taken the liberty of opening it up in the VLC media player, so if I just double click that we can have a look. And as you can see, we've got a pretty good, got a nice key. You can see through the hair where it's where there's actual gaps, and there's a slight little bit of halo down here, but that's not a big problem, I don't think. Mostly we've done a damn fine job on that key. The background doesn't look too out of place. And okay, so essentially for our first step, that's a good job. I'll just pause that. Yeah, so hope that was easy enough to follow, and your clips are turning out just as well, or even better. And we'll come in our next episode, and we'll start taking a look at actual moving clips, which will involve using Blender's tracking features, which if we go to the movie clip editor, we have all these settings that we'll be using. That's not a very good thing. Let's go to the top here. Yeah, we'll be looking at the match move test wide from hollywoodcameraworks.us. Again, links down in the description. And if we just play that a little bit, you'll see we've got a lot of tracking to do. We'll be aiming to cut the model out, pin it to a 3D floor, and we'll probably throw in a couple of Suzannes and a couple of boxes just to get a feel for placing a live action model into a 3D workspace, just to have a little go at the basics of it. So that's what we've got to look forward to in our next video. So that's it from this video. I hope this introduction was useful to you, and you can obviously apply this to your own footage. And we hope to see your results on Google+ and Twitter and Facebook. I'll leave the links for those in the descriptions if you want to share your work. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much, and good evening.